Hey everybody, and welcome back to another max velocity weather forecast. And in today's forecast, we'll be breaking down a huge pattern change that'll be coming to the United States this weekend and next week that'll bring the potential for some flooding to some areas. Meanwhile, other areas will see the threat for some record-breaking high temperatures. I'll give you the latest breakdown on everything that you need to know in this forecast, but let's first begin with what's happening across the United States today. We're going to begin with the huge low pressure system that has brought the severe weather over the last several days. That is located all the way back up into here in Canada. This also brought a blizzard to areas in the Dakotas. Luckily, this is finally moving off to the north and east, but we still have to watch for the threat for some showers and storms along a stationary frontal boundary over the next several days. There will actually be a chance for some flooding back down in the southeast and as well as back through the lower Mississippi Valley as we go into this weekend and next week, but this will eventually set up a very strong ridge across the northeast, and that'll keep a lot of areas dry going into this upcoming weekend and as well as early next week. But before we go into the pattern change, I do want to mention back on Tuesday we had a full-blown severe weather outbreak. In fact, we had over 300 hail reports across the country, most of which were in the Midwest. We also had 18 tornado reports. At this point, there's at least been about a dozen confirmed tornadoes, and along with a lot of damaging wind reports. So there was some significant severe weather back on Tuesday, and the severe weather event that we covered here on Max Velocity on yesterday's stream also brought a ton of damaging winds to the United States. And we actually had a confirmed EF2 tornado back over in Louisville, Kentucky from yesterday, just for a heads up there, just in the suburbs there of Louisville. So yeah, there was some really significant severe weather here over the past several days. Luckily, we are going to be transitioning though into a drier and much more warm pattern for a large chunk of the country that just saw severe weather. However, some areas will be watching for the threat of some flooding and isolated severe weather over the next several days. So let's kind of talk about what that means here on the future radar over the next several days. So beginning with today, we'll be watching for showers and storms across anywhere from the mid-Atlantic back through the lower Mississippi Valley. We could see a couple of isolated severe storms today, but this is nothing in comparison to what we just saw over the past 48 to 72 hours. But once we eventually go into Friday and into Saturday, this stationary frontal boundary will really just continue to dump rain across the lower Mississippi Valley. That is where we could see some flooding potential, and even maybe back through the mid-Atlantic. I wouldn't rule out a little bit of flash flooding as well. But look back up here to the north. A very strong high pressure system. This is a ridge that'll be basically keeping the entire northeast and as well as the Midwest and the northern plains all dry for the next several days, and it could even keep areas back in the central plains fairly dry for this entire weekend and into early next week. What this means is that we'll see warmer weather, but also much drier air as well. That will basically mean we're not going to see any precipitation for the most part. Once we go eventually into Saturday into Sunday, that low pressure system will be back down here into areas like Florida, but we're going to have to watch this area very closely, because once we go into next week, this could actually turn into a low pressure system on Tuesday or Wednesday down in the Gulf of Mexico, which could actually spur up some showers and storms back through the southeast. That is where we might see a little bit of isolated severe weather going into next week. You might be thinking, since it's a low pressure system developing in the Gulf of Mexico, you may be wondering, will this become a tropical storm? Well, it's probably not going to happen. The water temperatures are just warm enough in the central Gulf, but near the coastlines are in the upper 60s and 70s right now, so it's not really warm enough really for a tropical storm to develop, but this will act somewhat like one. We'll be definitely watching for at least some showers and storms that'll bring really beneficial rainfall to areas like Florida, and eventually by late next week, which this is when things really become much more uncertain, we'll probably be watching that high pressure system moving back into Canada. That should allow for a couple of low pressure systems, basically troughs, beginning to go through areas like the Great Plains, so we might be able to see some severe weather as we go into late next week and into the weekend. So something to watch for long term, but for right now, I'm not overly concerned about most of that activity. And over the short term, the area that I have the most concern about in the United States will be back down here in the lower Mississippi Valley. That is where we have flood watches in effect for the next few days. That is where we'll likely see a lot of rainfall, because again, we're going to see the potential for a stationary frontal boundary bringing additional rainfall to areas that just do not need it right now. So going through the future radar through Thursday and Friday, showers and storms will continue. Most of this activity will not be severe, but if any storms are severe, damaging winds is really the only concern. Once we go into Saturday into Sunday, still rain will continue, but it starts to shift further to the east. So those areas that are under flood watches, you're really watching for rain from now through Saturday. Eventually going to late Saturday into Sunday, that is when that low pressure system will move off to the east. And again, once we go into next week, that is when we'll be watching for more showers and storms, but that will not be probably unleashed until next Tuesday or Wednesday. So not really a concern here in the short term. And again, things change change that far out as well. In terms of the rain outlook over the next 7 days, the most of the rainfall will really be down here in the southeast United States. That's again where we have that stationary frontal boundary currently located, but otherwise across the rest of the country, there's really not going to be hardly any rain across the central or northern plains back through the Midwest or the Northeast. So we have a great break in the action, no big severe weather, nothing too crazy, really nice weather overall. So make sure you get outdoors. Temperatures will be really warm, which I'll talk about that here in just a second. In terms of the flooding potential though, back down in Mississippi, Arkansas, and Louisiana, some areas will likely see between 3 to 6 inches of rain. That's a bit more of an isolated amount, but most areas will at least see 1 to 3 inches of rain when this is all said and done going through the weekend. So again, flooding potential exists, so make sure if you're on the roadways, turn around, don't drown. Now, over the next 6 to 10 days, the Climate Prediction Center has issued a really high chance of us seeing above average temperatures across areas in the Midwest, central and even southern plains, and back through the Northeast. This is from the 11th of this month through the 15th, so basically next week. That is when we'll be watching for really above average temperatures across the country, but most of us will be above average. The only exception is the really far western tier of the United States, which is where cooler temperatures will be ongoing due to some disturbances that will be impacting areas back over near Washington and California. And what that looks like on the temperature anomalies, well, over the next few days will remain around average for this weekend, but by next week that ridge will build in well above average temperatures, and potentially record-breaking heat will be possible across the northern plains and the Midwest. You can see all this orange and as well as even the grays here. That represents well above average temperatures, and once we go into Thursday and Friday, we're still watching that late next week. We'll be watching for well above average temperatures. The only exception will be with that low pressure system down in the southeast. Things will remain very average, and then on the western tier of the United States, still remaining below average out that direction. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like the video down below and subscribe if you've not already. This forecast is brought to you by Platinum Contracting.